I ignored my sister when she said my husband harassed her, then I used her inheritance to save him. I dragged my 4-year-old daughter into the guilt trip and still expected my sister to trust me. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. My sister legally got my house after I used her money to save my husband. And it all started because I decided not to believe her when she said he had harassed her. I know how that sounds, but at that moment I didn't have another choice. My husband was dying. That's not a figure of speech. It's not being dramatic. The doctor was clear from the beginning. At any moment his heart can fail. There's no nice way to hear that. You go from having a normal life to living by counting seconds. Every time he's silent for too long, every time he puts his hand on his chest, you feel like it could be the last time. We have a 4-year-old daughter, and all I could think about was that she wouldn't grow up with her father. We tried everything. I sold my things, we cut expenses, we asked for help, but nothing was enough. The operation cost more than we could raise in years, and the bank wouldn't even give us a chance. We can't approve the loan, they told us. Your husband is the only stable income, and he's sick. Just like that. That's when I started thinking about the inheritance. My grandfather had recently died and left money. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to cover almost the entire operation. The problem is that it wasn't for me, it was for my sister. She's 17 years old, lives with my parents, doesn't work, and according to everyone that money was her future, but my husband was my present and my daughter's too. I tried not to think about it that way. I tried to be fair, but every day that passed it became harder to ignore, especially because there was something strange. My sister avoided my husband. It wasn't obvious at first, but when we started spending more time at my parents' house, I noticed. If he entered the room, she would leave. If he spoke, she wouldn't answer. Once, I even saw her tense up, like she was uncomfortable, as if she didn't want to be near him. I mentioned it to my mom. She's being weird, I told her. Haven't you noticed she's a teenager? She replied. They're like that. I wanted to believe her because the other option didn't make sense, or I didn't want it to. Everything exploded one night. My husband started to feel bad, but not like before. This time it was worse, much worse. He couldn't breathe well. He was holding his chest as if something inside him was really failing. We took him to the emergency room. I remember being there with my daughter crying, watching them take him away while I tried not to lose my mind. A doctor came out after a while. He needs the operation. He said, it's no longer something you can postpone. How much time do we have? I asked. He looked at me seriously. Days, maybe less. I felt like the world was collapsing on me, and that's when I stopped thinking about what was right. I only thought about what was necessary. I took out my phone. I called my sister. She answered after a few seconds. What do you want? I didn't like her tone, but I didn't have time for that. I'm at the hospital, I told her. It's serious. Silence. And that hurt me more than I expected. The doctor says he needs the operation. Now, I continued. We don't have time. The doctor was nearby. I looked at him. Can you tell her? I asked him. He looked at me for a second, hesitating, but then he agreed. I put the phone on speaker. Miss, said the doctor, the situation is critical. Without intervention, the patient could pass away at any moment. Silence. An uncomfortable, long silence. My daughter was still crying in the background. I could barely breathe. Then I said, are you going to help us? Another pause. And then no. Just like that. A cold, direct. What? I asked, unable to believe it. I'm not going to give you the money, she said. It's not yours. I felt something inside me break. Are you hearing what the doctor said? I yelled at her. He could die. I heard him. So how can you say no? There was a second of silence, and then she said something I didn't expect. After what he did, do you really expect me to help you? I froze. What are you talking about? But she didn't explain further. She just said, I'm not going to help you. And she hung up. I remember staring at the phone as if it was going to change what had just happened. But no, my husband was on a gurney, my daughter was crying, and my sister simply decided she wasn't going to help. That's when I stopped trying to be reasonable. The next day, it wasn't me who organized everything. It was my mother. This can't go on like this, she told me on the phone. We're all going to talk. I knew what that meant. A family meeting. I didn't love the idea, but I wasn't going to reject it either. If that's what it took to make her see reason, I'd do it. We arrived at my parents' house in the afternoon. Everyone was already there. My father, serious as always, my mother nervous, and my sister sitting on the sofa looking at her phone, as if none of this mattered to her. But it wasn't just us, 2 of my uncles were there. That surprised me. Why are they here? I asked in a low voice. So she'll listen, my mother replied. Sometimes you need someone else to tell you things. I understood immediately. This wasn't going to be a conversation, it was going to be pressure. I sat in front of her. I guess you know why we're here, I told her. She didn't look up. Yes. One of my uncles intervened. Your sister told us the situation, he said. And honestly, this is quite serious. My sister sighed as if it bothered her to be there. I know. Then I don't understand, he continued. If you can help, why don't you? Silence, because I don't want to, she replied. That made the whole atmosphere tense. It's not a matter of wanting to, my mother intervened. It's your family. I'm also my family, she replied, repeating the same thing as before. I felt the frustration rising in me again. We're not talking about just anything, I told her. We're talking about him possibly dying. I know. Then stop acting like it doesn't matter. I didn't say it doesn't matter. Then prove it. I told her. Help us. One of my uncles spoke again. Look, nobody's taking anything from you. It's a loan. It'll be paid back. My sister let out a small laugh. Sure. What does that mean? I asked. For the first time she looked up. That I don't trust you to pay me back. That offended me. Excuse me. You heard me. Do you really think I'm going to steal from you? I told her. I think you're desperate, she replied. And desperate people do things. That comment made my mother intervene more forcefully. That's enough, she said. This isn't fair. Your sister is going through something horrible. I went through something horrible too, she replied. The atmosphere changed. It's not the same, I said immediately. For me it is. There you go with that again, my mother intervened. We already talked about that topic, didn't we? She replied firmly. You guys ignored it. One of my uncles frowned. What's she talking about? Silence. My mother hesitated. I did too, but my sister spoke about your husband, she said, looking directly at me. About what he did. I felt that same emptiness in my stomach as the day before. Don't start, I told her. Why not? She replied. Because now it matters. This has nothing to do with it. I said, you're mixing things up so you don't have to help. It has everything to do with it. One of my uncles intervened. What happened exactly? My sister hesitated for a second and then shook her head. It doesn't matter, she said. It's whatever now. No, say it. I insisted. If you're going to use that as an excuse, say it. She looked at me intently. For a second I thought she'd say it, but she didn't. I'm not going to repeat it, she replied. I already tried before. My mother sighed. It's not the time. It's never the time for you guys. She replied. I felt like I was losing control of the conversation, so I did the only thing I knew would work. I looked at my daughter, who was sitting next to me, hugging a stuffed animal. Look at her, I told my sister. Look at her closely. She didn't move. She's 4 years old. I continued. Are you really going to let her grow up without a father when you can prevent it? Silence. Heavy. Unbearable. One of my uncles added, if something happens to him, you'll know you could have done something. That's when my sister changed. She no longer seemed uncomfortable. She seemed angry. That's what you want, she said. For me to feel guilty? I didn't answer. We want you to do the right thing. The right thing for you guys. She corrected. The right thing in general. No. That word fell like a blow again. I'm not giving you the money, she said. And you can say whatever you want. You're unbelievable. I told her. Truly. And you're manipulative. She replied. That made me stand up. Manipulative, I repeated, for trying to save my husband, for using your daughter, she said, for turning everyone against me. Because you brought it on yourself. I didn't get up. I just learned. Learned what? I asked her. She looked at me directly. Not to trust you guys. And she left.
Just like that.
The silence she left behind was worse than any shout. Nobody said anything for a few seconds until one of my uncles spoke. This isn't going to be easy. No, it wasn't going to be. And the worst part was that now I couldn't even talk to her, and time was running out. That same night, the hospital called. My husband had gotten worse. It wasn't a checkup, not a follow-up. It was urgent. When I arrived, I saw him connected to more things than before. He was breathing with difficulty. He could barely speak. The doctor was direct. "We can't wait any longer," he said. "If he doesn't have surgery in a matter of days, he won't make it."
Days.
It was no longer a distant possibility. It was a real countdown. And at that moment, I didn't care about anything else. Not the meeting. Not what she had said. Not even what she had implied. I only thought about one thing. I couldn't let him die. So, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went to my parents' house without warning, without thinking. I went straight in. My sister was in the living room. When she saw me, her expression changed immediately. "What are you doing here?" "The same thing you didn't do," I replied. "Trying to fix this." "I already told you no."
"I don't care what you said."
I interrupted her.
"He's dying."
"It's not my shut up," I screamed. "Don't you dare say it's not your problem again." The atmosphere became heavy in seconds. "I'm not giving you the money," she repeated. "Yes, you are," I replied, "because you don't have another choice." She let out a short laugh. "Oh no, I don't," I said. "Because if you don't, it's going to be your fault." That made her change.
"No," she replied.
"It won't be my fault."
"Of course it will," I said.
"You could have prevented it." "No," she repeated. "And that's enough." I got closer. "What's wrong with you?" I said. "What's so important that you'd prefer this?" She looked at me intently, and this time, she didn't hesitate that your husband touched me. The silence was immediate, heavier than anything that had happened before.
"What?"
"It wasn't once," she continued. "It was several times, comments, getting too close, things that weren't normal. I felt something inside me refuse to process it." "Are you lying?" "Of course, you're lying," I repeated. "He would never do that." "He did," she replied.
"And you know it." "No."
"I told Mom," she continued. "I told Dad." "Do you know what they did?"
"No."
I replied nothing. That bothered me more than it should have. Because it wasn't true. Because they didn't want to believe it. Because it didn't make sense.
"Sure," she said.
"It's easier to think that than to accept what happened." "This doesn't change anything," I said. "We're talking about a life. For me it changes everything." "No," I replied. "It doesn't." "Then don't ask me for anything." At that moment, my father walked in. "What's going on?" "Tell him," my sister said. "Tell him what's happening." My mother also appeared, clearly upset.
"It's not the time for this," she said.
"Please, it's never the time for you guys," my sister replied. My father sighed. "We've already talked about this," he said. "We're not going to solve it now."
"Of course not," she replied.
"What we're going to solve," he continued, "is the other thing." He looked at me. "How much do you need?" For the first time, in all that time, I felt like something could change. I told him the amount. My father nodded slowly. "It can be done." My sister looked at him surprised.
"What?"
"It's not a gift," he said. "It's a loan, isn't it?" She replied immediately. "Yes," he said, "because this is no longer emotional, it's legal." That gave me a strange feeling, as if everything was becoming cold, controlled. "If you accept," my father continued, "it's done under contract." "Contract?" I asked. "Yes," he replied, "and with collateral." He looked directly at me. "The house." I felt the blow of that word. "It's the only thing you have," he said, "and it's the only thing that ensures this gets paid back." "It's too much," I said. "It's fair." "It's not." "Then there's no money." Silence. My sister spoke. "I want everything in writing," she said. "Every detail it will be," my father replied. "And if she doesn't pay," she continued, "I want the house." Just like that, without hesitating. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Seriously," I told her. "Yes," she replied. "Because I don't trust you." That hurt more than anything else. My father took out some papers. I don't know how long he'd had them prepared. Maybe he had already thought about this before. Maybe all of this was already decided. "I'm going to read it," he said. And he did. Every clause, every condition, every consequence. In case of default, the property will be transferred without right to claim. He said it just like that out loud, looking at me. "Sign or there's no money," he added. I looked at my mother. She didn't say anything. I looked at my sister either. And I thought about my husband at the hospital, about the countdown, about my daughter, and at that moment I had no other choice. So I took the pen, and still I signed. I don't remember really thinking about it. It was automatic, as if my hand had decided before I did. As soon as I finished, my father took the papers without saying a word. My sister didn't even look at me, and at that moment I understood something. This wasn't family anymore, it was a deal. The money came fast, too fast, as if everything had been prepared beforehand. The operation happened a few days later. I remember sitting outside the operating room with my daughter asleep on my lap, staring at the door as if everything depended on it. And in a way it did. When the doctor came out, he didn't say much, just "it went well." And at that moment, I felt like it had all been worth it. Everything, the arguments, the contract, the tension, everything. I saved him. That was the only thing that mattered. Or so I thought, because reality doesn't take long to catch up with you. The recovery was slow, slower than I expected. My husband couldn't go back to work like before. They reduced his hours. He had to rest. Constant medication, frequent checkups, less income, more expenses, and time kept ticking. At first I tried not to think about it. I told myself we'd find a way, that everything would get better, that this was only temporary, but it wasn't. Every month was the same. We paid the basics, and what was left just wasn't enough, not even close. And then the reminders started. My father didn't call to ask how we were. He called to remind me of the debt. "Don't forget the date," he'd say. Always the same, without emotion, without context, just that. My sister didn't say much, but when I went to the house, the atmosphere changed. It wasn't discomfort anymore, it was distance, as if I were someone you had to be careful with. That bothered me a lot, but I ignored it because in my head everything was still temporary until something happened that for a moment I thought would fix everything. My sister got a full scholarship. University covered. When I found out, the first thing I felt was relief. Real relief. Finally, something was going my way. Because if the money was for her studies and she no longer needed it, then none of this made sense anymore. So I went straight to talk to them. I didn't wait. I didn't hesitate. "We need to talk," I said as soon as I walked in. My father was there, my sister too. My mother in the kitchen listening. "About what?" he asked. "About the money," I replied. "It doesn't make sense for me to have to pay it all back." Silence. "She has a scholarship," I continued. "She doesn't need it for school." My sister looked up. "Yes, I do." "For what?" I told her. "You have everything covered now." "For whatever I want." That answer irritated me. "It's not that simple," I said. "We're talking about a debt that only exists because the situation was extreme. The debt exists because you signed, my father intervened. Because I didn't have another choice." "You always have choices." "Not at that moment." "Yes," he replied. "You just didn't like them." I felt the frustration returning. "This isn't fair," I said. "She doesn't need it anymore." "You could just," my sister interrupted. "No, what?" "I'm not just going to let it go."
"Why?"
I asked her. "What do you gain from this?" She looked at me intently. "Peace of mind." That left me speechless for a second. "Peace of mind." "Yes," she replied. "Knowing you don't depend on me, that you can't put me in that situation again." That bothered me. "I'm not putting you in any situation," I said. "I'm trying to fix something." "No," she replied. "You're trying to get out of something you agreed to." My mother intervened. Maybe they could give her more time. My father ignored her. "The deadline remains the same." "I need more time," I said. "You already have it." "It's not enough." "It never will be," he replied. "If you can't pay now, you won't be able to later either." That sentence hit me because deep down I knew he was right, but I wasn't going to admit it. "I'm going to pay," I said. "I just need you to stop pressuring me." "It's not pressure," he replied. "It's compliance." We argued a bit more. It was useless. In the end, he agreed to give me 6 more months. 6 months. Last chance. And this time he made it clear. After this, he said, "There's nothing more." He said it looking directly at me, without emotion, without a doubt. And at that moment, for the first time, I felt like this wasn't going to end well, but still, I tried to convince myself that it would, that in 6 months everything would get better, that we'd find a way, that somehow this wouldn't go all the way to the end. It didn't happen. The months went by fast, too fast, and every attempt to save money ended in the same thing. Medicines, checkups, basic expenses, and the little that was left wasn't nearly enough. I tried to find extra income, to cut back even more. I even thought about selling the house, but that didn't make sense. It was the only thing we had left. And besides, in my head, it was never going to get to that point because we were family, or so I kept telling myself until the day the deadline arrived. I went to my parents' house. I knew I didn't have the full amount. I knew the conversation was going to be difficult, but I didn't expect what was already decided. They were all there. My father, as always, sitting, my mother nervous, my sister calm. Too calm. I sat down. "I don't have all the money," I said, "but I need more time." My father didn't react immediately. "How much do you have?"
I told him the amount.
"It's not enough." "I know," I replied, "but it's not that I don't want to pay. It's that I haven't been able to. Everything with the recovery, the expenses, you've said that before." I felt the frustration starting to rise. Because it's still the reality. My husband spoke. "We're really trying." "It's not enough," my father interrupted. "We just need to get organized," he continued. "Can't we make a plan?" There, without nuances.
Why not? I asked.
"Why can't we fix this?" My father looked at me directly. "Because I no longer trust you to pay." That hit me. After everything that's happened, precisely because of everything that's happened, I felt the conversation slipping away from me. "This isn't fair," I said. "We're talking about leaving us on the street. You're in this situation because of your decisions?"
No, I yelled.
"I'm in this situation because you guys took this too far." My mother tried to intervene. "We can give her more time." My father raised his hand. "No," I looked at my sister. "Say something." I told her, "This is yours too."
No, she replied.
"This is yours." "Of course it's not." I exploded. "This all started because you didn't want to help. This all started when you signed. Because I had no choice. You always had one." "Which one?" She looked at me intently, not accepting. That answer took my breath away for a second. My husband tried again. "Can we find a solution?" "There's no solution," my father said. Silence. A different silence, heavier, more definitive. "So, what are you going to do?" I asked. My father stood up slowly. "What I've already done." I felt an immediate emptiness. "What?" "The process is already underway," he said. For weeks the world came crashing down on me. "What did you say?" "I started the execution of the contract without telling me," I screamed. My mother looked at him in shock. "You didn't tell her because I knew she'd react like this," he replied. "This is a betrayal." I screamed. "You can't do this." "I can," he replied. And I did. My husband tried to intervene. "Please, this can be fixed." "Not anymore," my father said. "Now it's legal." I looked at my sister. "Did you know?" "Yes," she replied. That word hurt more than anything else. "And you're okay with it?"
Yes.
After all this," she repeated, "I don't trust you." I felt something break inside me. "You're unbelievable," I told her. "Truly unbelievable." "I learned," she replied, "from the last time I trusted." There was nothing more to say, nothing to negotiate, nothing to save. I got up. "If my family is destroyed by this, it's your fault." My father shook his head. "No, it's a consequence of your decisions." I left there feeling like everything was falling apart, but I still didn't understand how much until the notice arrived. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to leave my house. I remember rereading that paper over and over, as if at some point it would change, but it was clear, legal, final. I tried to call my father that same day. He didn't answer. I tried my mother.
"I don't know what to tell you," she said.
"It's not up to me anymore." I hung up. I felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. I tried to find legal help. I went to a lawyer, I brought the contract. I explained everything. He reviewed it in silence. It's signed, he said finally. Yes, but it was under duress. It's still valid.
It's my family.
That doesn't change the document. That's when I understood there was no way out. Still, I tried one last time. I went to my parents' house. This time I didn't scream. I didn't demand. I just talked. You can't do this. I said, please, not like this. My father was sitting as always.
My sister by his side.
My mother in silence. It's already been discussed, he replied. No, I said.
No, we can fix it like this. Give me more time.
Whatever it takes.
No. Why?
I asked. What do you gain from this? My sister replied, security. Security. From what? That this won't happen again. It won't happen. I said, I just need time. You said that before. Because I couldn't. I exploded. It's not that I don't want to pay. That doesn't change anything. Of course it does. I screamed. We're talking about leaving us on the street. My father spoke. So, you're in this situation because of your decisions? No, I replied. I'm in this situation because you guys decided to take this all the way. No, he said. You took it all the way when you signed. Silence. A silence that had no turning back. So you're not going to do anything, I said. No, he replied. Not even for your granddaughter. My mother looked down. My father didn't react. You should have thought of that before. I felt something inside me break completely. Okay, I said. Finally. Do whatever you want. And I left. The day of the eviction came faster than I expected. Too fast. I didn't sleep the night before. My daughter asked why there were boxes. I didn't know what to tell her. My husband could barely help, and I was just trying to hold everything together until they knocked on the door hard. Repeatedly, when I opened it, they were there, the police with papers, with clear instructions. You have to vacate the property, one of them said. I tried to speak. I just need more time, ma'am. You've had your time. Please, my daughter, we have to follow the order. The neighbors started to come out, to watch, to whisper. That was the worst part, not just losing the house, but losing it like that. In front of everyone. My daughter started to cry. Mommy, why are they kicking us out? I didn't know what to answer. My husband tried to say something, but he barely had the strength. They took us out. By force with the little we could carry. The rest was left behind. That house wasn't ours anymore ever again. Later I found out the transfer was already legally done. It was now in my sister's name. Just like that, we went to live with my in-laws. It's not the same. Nothing is the same. And the worst part is that everyone acts like this is fair. As if I did something wrong. As if saving my husband was a mistake. Yes, I signed. Yes, I couldn't pay. But does that really justify all of this? Is it really okay to take your own family's house away? I don't think so, but it seems I'm the only one. So tell me, am I the bad one?
Comment 1. So,
you basically ignored a harassment accusation because it was convenient for you. Then you used emotional pressure with a 4-year-old child as a weapon. Your sister doesn't owe you her future to save someone she clearly doesn't trust. Comment 2.
My husband might die.
My sister says he harassed her and your decision was him.
Yep.
I'm going to ignore that completely.
Yep. So.
Pretty clear. Opie replies, I didn't ignore it, but I also couldn't destroy my marriage over something that was never confirmed. Besides, the situation was urgent. Comment 3. You didn't lose your house because of your sister. You lost it when you signed a contract that basically said if I don't pay, I'll be on the street. Spoiler, you didn't pay. Comment 4. Your dad didn't take your house. Your dad gave you money that wasn't his, and then made sure you paid it back. That's called being a functional adult. You're not. Opie replies, my dad could have handled this differently. It didn't need to go to that extreme. We're family. Comment 5. Honestly, the most disturbing thing isn't the money. It's how quickly you dismiss the idea that your husband could have done something. That says more about you than the whole story. Comment 6. You used. Check mark your daughter. Check mark the hospital. Check mark family pressure. Check mark emotional guilt. And you're still surprised they don't trust you. Interesting.
Opie replies, I didn't use anything. That was the reality. All of that was happening. I didn't make it up to manipulate. Comment 7. Your husband harassed me. But I need money. Skull. 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 Comment 8. I don't understand how you wrote all this and didn't realize you sound like the villain in every part. Opie replies, because I'm not. I just did what anyone would do in my place. Comment 9. The real victim here is your sister. Not only was she not believed, but then she was pressured to financially help the person who made her feel unsafe. That's brutal. Comment 10. We were family, yes. And that's precisely why your sister set boundaries. Because family doesn't mean you can ignore what you did to me. Or replies, for me, family also means supporting each other in extreme moments. I don't think what she did is justifiable. Story 2. I told my anxious son it was not a big deal, and defended my stepson even after I found proof he was mocking him. But now both of my children have left me. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. I took my anxious son's desk while he was trying to breathe without fainting. It sounds brutal said like that, I know. But at that moment I was convinced I was doing the right thing. I ignored his attacks in front of teachers, but I threw a huge party that same week. When I finally found proof, I chose the other one again, and now that sequence doesn't let me sleep. I'm Valeria, I'm 44, Daniel's biological mother, 16 at the time. Ivan's stepmother, 17. Everything finally broke when I confronted Ivan for making fun of Daniel's anxiety, and I still defended him. But I understood that later. At the moment, I only saw one strong son, and another who, according to me, needed to toughen up. Daniel was always nervous. Since he was little, he'd ask 3 times if he had done his homework right, if I was proud of him, if he could improve something. That exasperated me. It seemed like an unnecessary insecurity, almost a weakness that had to be nipped in the bud. Ivan, on the other hand, came into my life with firm steps. He spoke loudly, laughed without asking for permission, had friends who looked for him, teachers who recommended him. When I married Hector, I felt something very concrete. I finally had a son I could brag about without explaining anything uncomfortable. It wasn't an abrupt change, it was something more subtle. Small comparisons. If we had to choose an extracurricular activity and the budget wasn't enough for both, I chose Ivan's. I told myself he would actually take advantage of it. If we had to decide who needed extra classes, I invested in Ivan because his results were more promising. Daniel would sweat before presenting in class. He'd run out of breath, and I called it an exaggeration. Ivan asked for more responsibilities, and I called it character. The first time the school called me about an anxiety attack was in his sophomore year of high school. They described cold sweat, tremors, shortness of breath. I responded almost automatically. It's not a big deal. He just wants attention. I said it with that certainty that scares me when I remember it, as if I were an expert in something I never tried to understand. Daniel asked for therapy. He spoke to me in a low voice, looking at the floor. I told him I wasn't going to spend money on nerves. That same month I paid for private classes for Ivan to raise his average, and I financed an academic trip that excited him. Daniel didn't yell, he didn't argue. He just looked at me. And in that look there was something I didn't want to decipher. The desk was the clearest symbol. Ivan needed a decent study space. That's what I said. Daniel could make do with less. I reduced his room. I moved his things without asking for permission. I sold his comic book collection, an inheritance from his father, before he left. I said they were childish things, that it was time to grow up. When he cried, I slammed the door. I told him a phrase that now echoes in my head. No one's going to love someone so unstable. I said it as if it were an objective truth. Damn. I remember his breathing, trying to calm down while I spoke. That forced breathing, as if every word of mine weighed on his chest. At family dinners, I compared grades. Ivan, if he tries, I'd say. If something broke at home, Daniel paid. If something disappeared, I assumed it was him for being distracted. It was easier to blame the one who already seemed fragile. You didn't have to convince anyone.
The story was already written in my head. One day, Daniel received an award for a science project. He came home with a diploma folded in his backpack, almost hidden. I barely looked up when he showed it to me. "It's no big deal," I replied. That same week, I threw a huge party because Ivan was made captain of the team. Balloons, guests, music. I moved proudly among the people. Daniel stayed upstairs. He didn't even come down to say hello. Over time, he stopped asking me for help. He just took a deep breath when I pointed him out. That gesture irritated me more than his attacks. It was as if his silence was accusing me without saying anything. The school counselors talked about urgent intervention. They used words that made me uncomfortable. I said they were being dramatic. Hell. I thought life would toughen him up, that if I didn't, the world would. But the world wasn't being cruel. I was. There was a specific day I can't get out of my head. Daniel tried to explain to me how he felt before a presentation. He told me about a knot in his stomach, about the feeling that he couldn't get enough air. I interrupted him. I told him we all get nervous, that he should stop playing the victim. I compared him again. Ivan, at his age, was already competing, already leading, already excelling. Daniel stopped talking. He didn't argue. He just nodded. And that acceptance was worse than any rebellion. I kept telling myself I was raising a strong son, that the world has no patience for fragility, that if I overprotected him, I would ruin him. What I didn't see or didn't want to see was that I wasn't correcting a weakness. I was punishing something that made me deeply uncomfortable. Daniel's anxiety started to become more visible. Vomiting before school, insomnia, dark circles that wouldn't go away. Hector avoided getting too involved. He said it was teenage stuff, and I nodded because that explanation suited me until the messages arrived. That day, Ivan's phone vibrated on the kitchen table. He was in the shower. I don't know what prompted me to take it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that intuition I had been ignoring for a while. I opened the conversation and read. "He always breaks. Hide his things and you'll see." There were more taunts. Imitations of how Daniel breathed when he tried to calm down. Laughter written, as if it were applause. I felt something strange in my chest. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. As if part of me knew something like this was happening, and would have preferred not to find out. When Ivan came out, I confronted him in the kitchen. I asked him directly if he was doing that, if he was making fun of Daniel, if he was provoking him on purpose. Ivan cried. He said it was a joke, that Daniel exaggerates everything. He just wanted him to stop playing the victim. And there, right there, I had a real choice, and I chose to protect the strong one again. I put the phone away just like that. I left it face down on the table, as if by covering the screen I could also cover what I had just read. Ivan still had wet eyes, breathing fast, but not from anxiety, but from fear of losing something. I saw it. I saw the calculation behind his gesture, and still I told him it was teenage stuff. Not to make a drama. I asked him to be more discreet, not even to stop doing it. More discreet. That was all. That night, I heard Daniel vomit in the bathroom after another attack. I recognized the dry, contained sound, as if he didn't want to bother. I didn't knock on the door. I sat on the bed, looking at the wall. I thought that if I intervened, I would be confirming that he was fragile, that he needed rescuing. And I didn't want to raise someone like that. Damn. I kept telling myself that the world doesn't stop because you can't breathe. The next day, at breakfast, Ivan talked about a new school project. I listened to him attentively. I asked him questions. Daniel was in front of me with his hands around a cup that was already cold. He said nothing, not even when I mentioned that Ivan deserved support because he did try hard. The comparison came out on its own. Automatic, like a habit I no longer questioned. The calls from school became more frequent, concerned teachers, counselors insisting on urgent intervention. I responded with the same phrase. It's not a big deal. He just wants attention. I repeated it so many times that it started to sound like a mantra, a defense. If I accepted that it was serious, I had to accept that I had failed at something. And that I wasn't willing to look at. Daniel started to avoid common spaces. He would come down to eat when he knew Ivan wasn't there. He would lock himself in his reduced room, without his own desk, studying on the bed or on the floor. I would see him pass with his shoulders slumped, and I felt irritation, not compassion. It seemed like a chosen posture, almost theatrical. I didn't want to see that it was exhaustion. There was an incident at a family dinner that still burns me when I remember it. An uncle asked about both their grades. I answered for Ivan first, detailing every achievement, every future plan. When they mentioned Daniel, I shrugged. I said he was in a complicated phase, that he had to learn to manage his nerves. Daniel was there listening with his gaze fixed on his plate. That same week, I threw the party for Ivan's athletic achievement. Balloons in the living room. Loud music, people coming and going. I moved proudly, presenting him as an example of discipline. Daniel stayed upstairs as always. At one point, I went up to ask him to at least come down to say hello. I found him sitting on the floor, breathing slowly, counting in a low voice. He told me the noise made him dizzy. I replied that life is noisy, that he had to get used to it. I closed the door and went back down. The teasing continued. I didn't need to check the phone to know. There were small signs, objects moved, light-hearted comments that ended with a shared laugh between Ivan and his friends. Daniel would tense up. I would see the scene and decide not to intervene. It was easier to think he was exaggerating than to accept that cruelty was growing in my own house. One day, Daniel came home later from school. His shirt was wrinkled and his eyes were red. He said he'd had another attack in front of the class, that some people laughed. He didn't mention names, he didn't accuse anyone, he just said he wanted to change groups. I replied that running away wasn't a solution, that he had to face things, that if he always ran away he'd never be strong. I saw him nod again. That gesture became habitual, as if he no longer expected anything different from me. Hector started to notice the distance. He asked me if I didn't think we were being harsh. I told him discipline isn't cruelty, that someone had to maintain order. He avoided going deeper. He always avoided going deeper. And that omission allowed us to continue the same. The consequences started to become visible in small details. Daniel stopped participating in activities. He quit the science club. He stopped inviting friends over. His world shrank to his room and silent journeys through the house. I interpreted that as dramatism, as a way to punish me, never as a sign that he was fading. One afternoon, I found his backpack open. Inside was the diploma from the science project I had minimized. It was crumpled, almost torn. I looked at it for a few seconds and left it where it was. I didn't straighten it. I didn't say anything to him. I convinced myself I shouldn't reinforce small achievements if I wanted him to aspire to more. But the attention wasn't just internal anymore. The teachers requested a formal meeting. They talked about risk, urgent intervention, the possibility that Daniel needed immediate psychological support. I listened with my arms crossed. I felt they were exaggerating, that they were building a bigger problem than it was. I defended myself by saying that at home he was fine, that he was just sensitive. As I spoke, I remembered Ivan's messages. Hide his things and you'll see. That phrase came back like an uncomfortable echo. I didn't share it. I didn't expose Ivan. I chose to protect the image of a functional family rather than face the truth. That was the first real consequence. The school recorded my refusal to seek external help. I signed with my clear name, Valeria, as if that signature had no weight. That night Daniel didn't have dinner. He didn't come down. I went to his room and knocked on the door for the first time in a long time. He answered with a tired voice that he was fine. I didn't insist. I stood for a second in front of the closed door and felt something like doubt. Not guilt yet. Just a crack underneath. Ivan asked me for money to go out with friends. I gave it to him, without asking too many questions. He thanked me with a wide smile. That smile gave me peace of mind. It made me feel that at least one of them was on the right track. And without realizing it, that peace of mind started to have a cost I wasn't yet willing to pay. After the meeting with the school, I started to notice the silence in a different way. It wasn't the typical uncomfortable silence of a house with teenagers. It was denser, as if each wall knew something I refused to admit. I signed the document stating that I had refused urgent intervention, and for days I avoided thinking about it. I told myself they were exaggerating, that they were used to overdiagnosing, that I knew my son better than anyone. But did I really know him? That question started to haunt me when Daniel stopped reacting even to the most obvious provocations. Ivan would make comments in a low voice, small imitations of his ragged breathing, and Daniel wouldn't even lift his head anymore. Before, he would at least tense up. Now he seemed disconnected, as if he were watching everything from a distance. That indifference disturbed me more than his attacks. There was one afternoon when I watched him without him knowing. He was sitting on the floor of his room, leaning against the bed. He had no desk. He had put the books on a box. He moved his lips as he read, but no sound came out. He seemed focused, yes, but there was something dull in his expression. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds and then left without making a sound. I didn't want him to know I was watching him. I didn't want to start a conversation I didn't know how to hold. I started to justify myself more forcefully. I said that I had also had difficult times in my adolescence, that no one took me to therapy for nerves, that life had made me strong. That word again, strong, as if it were the only acceptable destiny. Deep down, although it was hard for me to admit it, I associated Daniel's anxiety with a personal failure as a mother. If he couldn't hold himself up, it was because I had done something wrong, and that idea was unbearable to me. It was easier to label him as exaggerated than to question myself. There was also pride. I needed to feel that I was doing things right. When I talked about Ivan with other people, I felt immediate validation, admiration, positive comments. On the other hand, when someone asked about Daniel, my answer was always accompanied by an explanation, by a but. And that but made me uncomfortable. One night I stayed awake longer than usual. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Daniel was going to the bathroom. His breathing became irregular. I recognized the beginning of an attack, even before he went in and closed the door. I got up, walked to the hallway, stood in front of the bathroom with my hands suspended in the air. I hesitated. I thought about knocking. I thought about telling him I was there. I didn't. I went back to my room with a strange mix of relief and weight on my chest. Relief because I wouldn't have to face his vulnerable gaze. That because I knew I was avoiding something important. That contradiction started to become constant. I claimed I was doing the best I could, but every decision seemed designed not to make me uncomfortable. Sometime later, I thought again about Ivan's messages, in the kitchen, his tears, how I said it was teenage stuff. If I'm honest, at that moment I already sensed the dynamic. I knew it wasn't just a joke. I knew there was deliberate provocation. And still I chose not to intervene, so as not to upset the balance that made me feel proud. If I confronted Ivan for real, if I forced him to acknowledge what he was doing, I would break the image of the exemplary son, and I needed that image. I was afraid of losing it. Daniel stopped asking me for permission to go out. He simply informed, sometimes not even that. He started spending more time outside. He got small jobs. He said it was to save money. I interpreted that as healthy independence. I didn't see it as an escape plan. One day, I found a notebook in his room. I didn't open it. I just saw it on the bed, with the cover worn. I thought about looking through it, but I stopped myself. Something told me that if I read what was in there, I wouldn't be able to keep pretending everything was under control. I closed the door and went downstairs. Ivan, on the other hand, continued to occupy the center. Plans for college, conversations about the future. I threw myself into those projects with enthusiasm. It was easier to talk about clear goals than confusing emotions, but the doubt was already there. I started to remember phrases I had said to Daniel. No one's going to love someone so unstable. I repeated it mentally, and it made me uncomfortable. I tried to justify it by saying it was a moment of anger, that I didn't mean it. However, I said it and he heard. There was a small attempt at rapprochement that I almost forgot. One afternoon he asked me to sit with him while he studied, not to help him, just to be there. He told me it calmed him to feel someone close. I had things to do. I replied that he should learn to concentrate on his own, that he wouldn't always have company. I saw him nod again, and I hated myself for a split second. Then I continued with my routine. That's the part that's hardest for me to explain. It wasn't that I didn't love him, I did, but his vulnerability made me uncomfortable. Like a mirror of something I didn't know how to handle myself. I preferred Ivan's loud security to Daniel's silent fragility. When Daniel turned 17, we barely argued anymore, not because we had found a balance, but because he stopped trying. I interpreted that silence as maturity, as a result of my firmness. I told myself he was finally learning to control his emotions. Now, looking back, I think he was learning not to show them in front of me. And that difference, which I ignored at the time, ended up being the crack that separated him from this house. The day he turned 18, there was no celebration. He didn't ask for one. I didn't organize one either. I told myself he was a big boy now, that those things were for kids. Daniel got up early, came down with a heavier-than-usual backpack, and ate breakfast in silence. I asked him if he had plans. He answered yes, but didn't give details.
I didn't insist.
Hours later, his room was half empty. There was no slammed door, no shouting, just cleared spaces where books and clothes used to be. On the bed, he left a folded sheet of paper, a single sentence written in a firm hand, without any crossouts. I don't want to try to be enough anymore. I read it several times. I expected to find something more, an explicit reproach, a long explanation. There was nothing, just that line. And in that brevity, I felt something I had never fully felt, irreversibility. I called his phone. It rang, he didn't answer. I texted him that we could talk, he didn't reply. I stayed in his room looking at the bare walls. The place where I had reduced his space now seemed immense and empty. Hector arrived that night, I told him. He sat on the edge of the bed and was silent. We didn't argue. There were no accusations, just a heavy feeling between us. I kept saying that he would surely come back, that it was a phase, but deep down I knew it wasn't a momentary impulse. Daniel had been preparing to leave for a while. As the week went on, I learned from third parties that he had found a stable job and had sought psychological help on his own without asking me for anything, without asking for my permission. That information produced a bitter mix in me, pride and shame at the same time. Pride because he was doing something for himself. Shame because I never accompanied him. In that process, I tried to write him longer messages. I deleted half before sending them. I didn't know how to start without sounding defensive. I didn't know how to acknowledge everything without dismantling the image I had maintained for years. Meanwhile, Ivan was still at home. We talked about his future, about college, about plans. I invested energy in that as if I could compensate for the other's absence, but something had changed even there. Ivan became more distant, less transparent, more demanding with the money I had saved for him. One day I checked a bank transfer I didn't recognize. Part of the money intended for his studies had disappeared. I confronted him. He told me he needed it for a project, that he would pay it back later. I hesitated. I checked in more detail. There were more movements that didn't add up. The conversation escalated quickly. There were no tears. This time, there was coldness. He told me he had always been clear that he needed freedom, that if I had decided to invest in him, it was my choice. His words weren't rude, but they didn't show guilt either. Suddenly, I saw something I hadn't wanted to see before. The same logic I had applied with Daniel, but inverted. If someone was stronger, they should manage. If someone got benefits, it was because they deserved them. Ivan had learned exactly that. We argued. Hector intervened, for the first time with firmness. He demanded responsibility. Ivan responded that he would leave before we controlled him. And he did. In a matter of days, he moved in with friends. He barely calls. The house was left in real silence. No, the tense silence from before, a hollow silence, without comparisons, without loud laughter, without ragged breathing behind a closed door. I would walk down the hall, and every space seemed to remind me of something. The place where the desk was, the table where I left the phone face down, the kitchen where I chose not to break the image I had. I started to reread Daniel's sentence every night. I don't want to try to be enough anymore. I asked myself, enough for whom? For me.
For my standard.
For that rigid idea of strength I defended, as if it were an absolute truth.
I tried to call again. This time he answered. His voice sounded different, more stable, more distant. I asked him how he was. He answered, fine. I told him we could talk about what happened. There was a long silence on the other end. Then he said he was busy.
What?
Maybe another day. That maybe became permanent. There was no dramatic confrontation, no reconciliation scene. Just accumulated consequences. Daniel building stability far away, and Ivan losing financial support and trust after leaving. And me being left with a house too big for two people. I always said I wanted strong children. That the world has no patience for fragility. Now I wonder if I confused resistance with indifference. If by trying to toughen one, I ended up teaching the other that empathy was optional. Every decision I made seemed logical at the time, rational, justified. Seen together, it formed something else. A chain that pushed one to silence and the other to replicate the selfishness he saw rewarded. I can't change what I did. I can only sit in this silent house and admit that the damage is clear and visible, that the decisions were irreversible. And that even if I repeat I did the best I could, that doesn't bring anyone back. The wear and tear didn't come all at once. It was slow, as if each memory decided to visit me in turns. Sometimes it was the image of Daniel sitting on the floor with his books propped up on a box. Other times, Ivan's laugh in the kitchen when I downplayed the messages. The phrase, "it's not a big deal," got stuck to me like a label I can't peel off anymore. I tried to fill the silence with routine. I tidied the house, moved furniture. I thought about putting the desk back in its original place. Even though there was no one to use it anymore, I assembled it anyway. I left it in front of the window. It seemed like an absurd gesture, but I needed to see it there, as if rearranging could rearrange years. Hector and I talked more than we used to, but always in circles. He admitted he avoided confrontation because he didn't want conflict. I admitted I confused discipline with coldness. Neither of us knew what to do with that admission. It doesn't bring solutions, just late clarity. Daniel is still working. Still in therapy. I know because he told me in a brief, almost formal conversation. He didn't ask me for help. He didn't ask for my opinion. He informed me like someone updating data. When I asked him if he needed anything, he replied that he was learning to handle his things on his own. That phrase cut through me. I had insisted he should manage. Now he was, but far from me. Ivan calls sporadically. The conversations are superficial. He talks about plans, friends, opportunities. He doesn't mention the money he took. He doesn't mention Daniel. I don't either. There's a distance that didn't exist before. A distrust I don't know how to reverse. I lost the emotional exclusivity he sought to secure, and with it I also lost the illusion of control. Sometimes I wonder at what exact moment I crossed the line. It wasn't a single decision, it was the accumulation, the reduced desk. The sold comic book collection. The phrase, "no one's going to love someone so unstable." The door I didn't knock on when he was vomiting in the bathroom. The messages I read and put away. Each small act built something big. I tell myself I did the best I could with what I knew. But I also know that many times I did know, I sensed, I saw signs and chose to look the other way because facing vulnerability made me uncomfortable, because I needed to feel public pride, because I feared others would judge my parenting. Now, the harshest judgment comes from me. I walk through the house, and the silence is no longer tension. It's a consequence. There are no comparisons to be made. There are no ragged breaths to ignore. There are no exaggerated applauses to offer. Just empty spaces that force me to think. If the strength I demanded ends up pushing them away, was it really strength or just my fear? I don't have an answer that leaves me at peace. Popular comments. Anonymous comment.
1.
You told him no one would love him, and that's not forgotten. A mother's words weigh more than any schoolyard taunt. Even though you see it now. He had to learn to breathe on his own. OP's response. That phrase haunts me every day. I can't erase it, and I know he can't either. Anonymous comment 2. It's hard to read how you ignored such clear signs. Sometimes doing nothing is also a decision, and it's usually the one that hurts the most later. OP's response. I understand that now.
At the time I convinced myself that not intervening was prudence. Anonymous comment 3. Your son asked for therapy and you denied him help. But you invested in the other. That difference marks a life. It's not just favoritism, it's unequal validation. OP's response. Yes. I prioritized what made me feel proud. It's hard for me to admit it, but it's true. Anonymous comment 4. Ivan was cruel, but he learned what he saw rewarded. You always defended him. What incentive did he have to change? OP's response. I never thought of it that way at the time. Now I see that I reinforced exactly what I should have stopped. Anonymous comment 5. Daniel's silence speaks more than any argument. When someone stops trying, they're tired of waiting for something that's not coming. OP's response. That silence weighs more than any scream he could have given. Anonymous comment 6. You wanted to toughen him up, but strength isn't born from humiliation. It's born from feeling safe first. OP's response. I confused resistance with indifference. And the result was devastating. Anonymous comment 7. It's funny that the son you considered strong ended up leaving too. Maybe the strength you admired was just a facade. OP's response. That possibility hurts me. Maybe I never saw either of them clearly. Anonymous comment 8. Not all is lost if you acknowledge your part. But acknowledging is not the same as repairing. He decides if he wants to open that door again. OP's response. I don't know if he'll give me the chance, and I can't demand it. Anonymous comment 9. I'm impressed how you minimized everything with "it's not a big deal." Sometimes that phrase is more damaging than a scream. OP's response. I repeated it so many times it became automatic. Now, every repetition shames me. Anonymous comment 10. If you could go back to the moment at the bathroom, would you knock on the door? OP's response. Yes, without a doubt. And that yes comes too late.